Welcome to another episode of Undocumented Momhood. I'm absolutely thrilled to introduce today's guest, a true trailblazer, Connie Wimmer. Connie is the founder and chairman of Business Publications Corp., where she has spent decades disrupting the publishing industry with her innovative approach and fearless leadership. Known for her bold risk-taking, strategic vision, and impeccable style, Connie is more than just a businesswoman. She's a force of nature, whether it's transforming how we think about business publications or bringing her signature flair and fashion sense to every project she touches. Connie's influence is undeniable. I've been a huge fan of Connie for a long time, so it's truly an honor to have her in the studio. Connie, thank you so much for taking time to join us on the podcast. I'm beyond excited to dive into your journey and hear your insights. Welcome, Connie.
Thank you, Laura. Thank you so much. I'm delighted to be here.
Thank you. I couldn't think. I know you and I have been emailing back and forth, and then you had a long trip to Tokyo.
Right.
For 3 weeks.
No.
How long were you there?
13 days.
Oh, my goodness. That's still amazing.
But also went to Osaka and Kyoto.
Wow. That's amazing. So you and I have been emailing back and forth for like a month about having you in the podcast, but I couldn't think of a better time to have you here, as we're like 2 days after election. And obviously the state of the country and the way that everything feels, personally, the way that I feel, I was like, this is amazing, because you're a true force, and you have been a true force for a lot of women. And I was like, what better to have her in the podcast? And, you know, today, 2 days after election, how are you feeling?
I'm somewhat depressed. I'm very sad. I think Kamala would have been an amazing president. And I think having a woman in that position will change the lives of most of the women in the United States, because people will become more accustomed to seeing a woman in leadership. So it would have been great on so many levels, but it is what it is, and we need to make the best of it.
Right. I feel that. I feel that a lot. I've been doing my research about you, even though I've been kind of a big fan of yours for a very long time. You just had a birthday.
I did.
How old are you now?
I'm 92 years old.
That's amazing. You don't look like you're 92.
Well, I talk about my age all the time because, for a long time, I was a role model as a female business owner. And I am having as much fun at this point in my life as I ever have. And I want young women and middle-aged women to know that life goes on. People talk about women become invisible at 40. Not so. Don't expect it, and don't let it happen to you. So I talk about it all the time.
I know. I love that about you. I read a few things, but also I ran into you at a DSM magazine launch party, and you were telling me all about it. Like, you were super open about your age and what was next and how much fun you were having. And I love that. So I have a couple questions that I wrote down because I truly did my research. So you also skydived for charity just a year ago.
Mm-hmm.
How was that?
Wonderful.
like they just asked you to do it and you were like, yes.
Dr. Deming is a wonderful, wonderful person. And he was trying to get people at a community foundation meeting. I think it was a ribbon cutting. And he had a little group of people he was talking to, and I was over in another area. And he came up to me and said, "Would you jump out of an airplane for me?" And I said, "Of course." He said, "I knew you'd say yes." And so he went back to the other group, all of whom had said no to him, and said, "Connie said yes." And he got 18 people.
Oh my God.
And we raised over $100,000.
That's amazing.
Just by jumping out of the airplane, having fun.
That's amazing. I was like, I've never done it, but I was telling the kids about you and like that research that I was doing. I'm like, now I feel like I need to go skydiving.
Well, I did it for the second time this year. And
just for fun?
No, for him again.
For him again.
But it was more fun than the first time.
Oh my God,
because you kind of know what to expect. Some of the sensations are pretty dramatic when you are. My tandem partner told me as you sit on the floor. You climb into the airplane on your hands and knees because there are no seats. And you're sitting there on the floor, and he's hooking us up together. And he says, "No, I need to prepare you. For a few seconds, you'll be hanging out of the airplane by yourself."
Like literally hanging.
And, what they can do with the photography is so amazing. And the photographer caught that. So I have a picture of myself all alone hanging outside
Ooh, I
this
want to see
airplane.
the photo. That would be amazing. Oh. So you've done it twice.
Mm-hmm.
Next year, if they ask you, you'll do it again.
If he asks me, he needs to get new people to do it, and I've been recruiting for it, and I've gotten a few.
All right. That's awesome.
Because the first time you do it, everybody contributes to the cause. The second time, it's old hat, so you don't raise quite as much money the second time.
So it's like basically you're like, I'm going to jump out of a plane. So like you send a link, and then like this is where you donate.
When I say I'm going to jump out of a plane, they say, "So what?"
No way. Send me that over. Maybe I'll convince Abner to do it.
I recommend it. I really do.
I think that would be great.
And, I always tell people, if you look at the statistics, the drive to the Knoxville airport, where it all happens, is far more dangerous than jumping out of the plane.
Is that why you were like, okay, it's ATPC? Like, so I'm not going to die jumping out of it. I might just die going there. You are a risk taker.
I am.
And basically everything that I was like, that people talk about you is like, you are a risk taker and you recommend women or everyone overall to take more risk. Tell me about that.
Well, risk taking and even failures, in my opinion, are just another way to learn. And I was forced, because of circumstances, to take some pretty big risks at different times in my life. And they turned out very well. And I say it's a muscle you have to exercise a little bit, because the more you take a risk, and even if you fail, learn enough to do something differently or to do it again and do it differently, the muscle gets stronger. And eventually, you develop what they call this gut feeling. And, if I have a gut feeling, I trust it. And at this point in time, I didn't always. But I tell young women, if they're not afraid in their job of some of the responsibilities, they need to change jobs.
You're in the wrong job then.
Mm-hmm.
Wow, one of the risks that you took, it was at the very beginning. Was it when did you buy the Iowa Title Company?
1976.
1976.
And most of the people that work with me weren't born then.
Now, the people that work with you, you bought that because you had 3 daughters at this point, right? And was it like that time when they were getting ready to go to college or like almost there? So there was no money for them to go to college.
And I can tell you really have done your research.
I did.
I don't have a college degree. And I was determined that my daughters would have that opportunity. And there was no money. And so I had been a legal secretary for many years, but I'd also done a lot of projects for people, doing things that I had no experience or training for that turned out well. So I decided I need to be in business for myself. I've always made money for people I work for, so I needed to do it for myself and my daughters. And I started out thinking about doing things that were fun, that I loved to do, like interior design.
I heard you did a little bit of that. Yes.
And quickly analyzed that that was not going to make enough money in a short enough period of time that I could send 3 girls to school. So I got practical and looked at it from the viewpoint of who are people in Des Moines that have worked with me on these different projects that would trust me and would say, well, if Connie's in the business, let's send the business to her. I knew a lot of lawyers, and I knew, well, I'd been a legal secretary, and I was married at that time to a lawyer. And I knew a lot of realtors, and I knew a lot of people in the banking business. So I tried to figure out what kind of business would relate to all 3 of those, and it was the title business. And the first time I thought about it, I rejected it because A, I didn't know anything about it. B, it sounded boring. And so when I didn't come up with anything better, I decided to talk to the 4 companies in Polk County. And one of them was reasonably priced. 3 of them were far out of my range. Because back in 1976, banks still didn't loan money to women unless they had a husband's signature. And so anyway, bought Iowa Title Company.
How do you buy Iowa Title Company without being able to get a loan?
I had a friend that loaned me $75,000. And I signed the note. My hand was shaking because at that time, $75,000 was a huge amount of money. And $50,000 of it went as a down payment. Then with a shaking hand, I signed a 20-year contract to pay off the rest of it. And I paid off the $75,000 in 18 months.
Oh, wow. 18 months?
It was at 9% interest, and when I tell that to people now, they think, gosh, that was high. At that time, it was a very low, reasonable rate. The interest rates went up to double digits, I think 18% at one point in time. But anyway, I got it at 9%, and I wish I would have saved that note. That would have been fun.
Yeah, that would have been amazing. Could have been framed. So after Iowa Title, how long you had Iowa Title before you started realizing that maybe publishing, or did that went hand in hand?
We did a kind of a turnaround. Iowa Title was the smallest of the 4 companies. It had been kicked out of both the Iowa and the American Land Title Association. They were illegally selling title insurance, and they were losing money. And so I had $25,000 of that $75,000 for cash flow.
Yes.
And for a company that was losing money and had 12 staff members, I look back on it and think that was pretty risky. I didn't ever have to borrow another penny. I was able to turn it around quickly enough that, and within 2 years, we were instead of the smallest, we were the largest of the 4.
That's amazing.
Well, there's an advantage to not knowing, to question everything. I always ask new staff members to question, why do you do it this way? Because fresh eyes, when you do something the same way year after year, you assume it's the way to do it. Mm-hmm. And actually, with the changes in technology and every aspect of the world has changed tremendously. So I always welcome new ideas and people questioning our methods. So anyway, to answer the question you asked, after about 3 or 4 years, I thought, I'm going to look for another business. This is easy.
At this point now, it's easy.
So I started looking around and didn't find a fit at all. But I had computerized the company. I guess I'm supposed to say digitized now.
Digitized now.
And all the records, the millions of records that a title company has to have, were put into the computer, which took many, many months. But abstractors, instead of having to go through the courthouse, many offices in the courthouse, and go through old books and records, and could now sit down at a computer and ask for the information, and it would be given to them. And I had 2 people enter all the information, so that if one stroke was different, it would kick it out. So we became the most accurate title company, first of all, but it enabled us to change the time an order took from 2 weeks to about 2 days on average. Well, realtors don't get paid until everything is closed and done. So if they can get that check 2 weeks earlier than they might otherwise,
they're going to use you.
that's how we went from smallest to largest in such a short period of time. But also, I questioned everything, and we just got smarter about how we did things, and it was fun. I talked to you about, I thought it was going to be boring. It was fascinating. I used to be asked to give speeches about abstracting, if you can believe it.
I love that.
So anyway, I'm looking around. In the meantime, we're buying the information to put into the computer from a little publishing company called the Des Moines Daily Record. A 4-page broadsheet that printed out everything that was in the courthouse that we needed to have access to. And so I went to the owner and asked him if he could speed things up, because the more quickly it got into the computer, the more efficient we were, and the more profitable. I wasn't looking at it as a business to buy, to create. I just looked at it as something that would make the title company more profitable. And the minute I walked into the office, I knew what his answer was going to be, because I felt like I was stepping back in time. Nothing had changed for decades, not years, decades. And indeed, he did say no, that he couldn't speed anything up. And so I waited a short time and thought about it, and finally went back to him and asked, would you consider selling? And his answer was, no, I have children and I need to pass it along. And so I waited a few more months and thought, I know he can't be making a profit doing things. They kept their subscriptions on little 3x5 cards in ink, filed in a shoebox. And I always say, one cup of coffee spilled in that would have ruined everything. And so perseverance is one of the other things that I talk to young women about, because just because something doesn't work or you don't get the answer you want the first time, life changes daily, constantly, hourly. And so I went back, and finally the third time, he said, yes, I'd like to sell it. And so I bought it solely thinking I would integrate it into the title company and just become more efficient. Well, again, I had purchased it from him with a down payment and a 20-year contract. And 18 months after I had signed that contract, my hand wasn't shaking that time, I learned that the judges were going to eliminate an official legal paper, which it was. That meant I literally had no product and no revenue. And I had 18 and a half years of the contract still coming due. And I knew Mr. McIntyre was the loveliest little man, and I knew that was his retirement, those 20 years of payments. So, and I had 5 days notice. So
wow.
That was the scariest day of my life. What am I going to do? How am I going to pay him back? So by day 2, the shock had worn off, and I started to think about, what can I do with the resources I have? Fortunately, I had been very active in the small business movement, both locally and nationally. I'd gone to 3 small business White House meetings, and so I recognized that our daily paper was not covering small business at all. And I chaired the Chamber's first small business committee, and one of the things I did was to call on the editor of the Register to ask him if he would print more small business news. And I made the terrible mistake of closing again, it was a shaky hand meeting. I was scared to death. And I'd done just an outline of the points I wanted to make, and the final one I made was, I think it would even enhance your advertising sales. Slammed his fist on his desk, and he said, "We don't use that word in this office."
Wow.
So I kind of snuck out the door, and they didn't change what they were printing. And so I had that background, and I felt strongly that a business paper was needed in Des Moines, because Des Moines was growing.
Right.
Which is why the Chamber had added a small business committee. And, prior to that movement, the old motto was, what's good for General Motors is good for the country. And somebody woke up and looked at the statistics and realized that small business creates a lot more jobs than big business does. So there was a strong positive feeling about small business. And we cover big business too, but there's a balance of finding those startups and small businesses.
So that was
81 when I bought it. That was 81 when I bought it. It was early 83 when the judges did me in.
Did you in? Gave you 5 days.
Yeah. And anyway, the first issues were just dreadful. They're embarrassing. They were so awful. I hired the wrong people. I knew nothing about publishing. And as I mentioned earlier, we lost money for either 3 or 4 years, but I still owned the title company.
So that Iowa title was making that survived, basically.
So I didn't have to borrow money for that. I could just lose it.
Yes.
Instead of keep it. And I look back and I wonder what gave me the perseverance to keep trying. I was sure it was going to work. And usually after 2 years of losing money, you'd start to think about
like maybe selling it or closing it down.
Nobody would have purchased it,
so
I
what
guarantee.
Do you think the perseverance was? What was the...
Pardon?
What was the perseverance? What was that meaning? Why did you keep going even though you were losing money?
And I wish I would have kept a diary of, even a couple of sentences of my thoughts. But we did keep getting better all the time. The big learning lesson is kind of a fun story, I think. I discovered there was an organization of business newspapers. And I think they had maybe 20 members at the time, and most of them in much larger cities. And so I applied for membership, thinking this is how I learn the business. And part of the application was to send a copy of 3 different issues of dates they gave you.
Okay.
And they called me to tell me that the committee turned you down because your paper doesn't meet our standards. And it didn't. It was awful.
What year was this?
Oh, let's see, 83, probably would have been 84.
Goodness.
So, again, I'm on this perseverance angle, but I said, I want very much to be a member. Could I come to one of the meetings? And he said, oh, no, we never allow a non-member to attend. And I said, well, I want so much to be a member, and I have no other way to learn. Would you poll the committee and see if I could come to just one meeting? And he did, and they said, yes, one, but only one. Well, I don't think I slept for 3 days because I went to, of course, every meeting, and then I tried to meet with each individual, and everybody took copies of their publications, and that's probably what I learned more from than anything else. And so I brought all that back and started making changes. And 6 months later, I reapplied, and I was accepted. And 4 years later, I was the first female president of the organization. So I still go to every single meeting because now I can give back. I took a lot, and now I can give back.
Give back. That's amazing. Was everybody in the first, like when they were not accepting you, was everybody a man?
They were all men for quite a few years after I joined. There were a lot of women that would attend meetings, but they weren't owners. And
or like secretaries or assistants?
No,
or
they'd be
people that will work, editors?
Or sales manager, perhaps. But I'd say it took probably almost 10 years before there were other women who were owners and publishers. And now it's still male-dominated, but there are a lot of women now.
Just like, so you were, because you're very open with your age, and obviously you have aged very gracefully, and then you're such an inspiration on the part of aging, but you were born in 1930s.
32.
32. Like, have you ever faced age discrimination now that you're like at this age? Or like whenever you were getting older? Because I remember my mom and her early 30s in Mexico already not being able to have a job because she was already considered too old. I myself, I'm turning 36 in a few days, and I find that fascinating. How was she like too old for that job?
You're about a third of my age, so you have 2/3 of your life left.
Yes. So looking forward to it.
Age discrimination. No, I don't. You know, I was frequently asked about just being female and discriminated against in business. And a couple of times is really all. I got into business about the time the world was recognizing that women had quite a bit to give in a lot of companies. I'd say I was a token many times, but you know, I didn't resent it. If you're allowed to speak and be heard and listened to, I don't care how I got there, as long as I can make a difference. The one time that I was not was I was appointed to the Federal Home Loan Bank Board by, get this, Jimmy Carter on his last day in office.
Connie!
And I was the first woman nationally to ever serve on the Federal Home Loan Bank Board. And the man who was the CEO at the time did not like it at all. He was not happy. And so what I discovered is that the men would meet at the bar before the board meeting and make all the decisions and have all the discussion. So I started going to the bar. And the other time when the judges did what they did, one of them was actually quoted as saying, "We're going to show that uppity woman." And they did it for me, not because they didn't need the product.
Yeah.
It was because I had gone to the legislature to lobby to increase, with legal papers, the fee is set by the legislature for some strange reason. It makes no sense. And so it had been the same forever, $1 per item. Well, the cost of printing, postage, payroll had all skyrocketed. It had not changed for, I think it was 35 years. And so I went over and lobbied, and I won. They increased it to $5. Well, at the same time, the judges were lobbying to have their retirement fund increased, and they lost. No comparison. I mean, no relationship
nothing
of
to do with each other,
any kind. But they were just really ticked off that I had been successful and they had not. And actually, they had lunch at a place called Babes, and if you haven't heard about it, you need to do research.
I'm going to do my research on that. I didn't bring my pen, but I will remember.
Anyway,
Babes, okay.
All the lawyers and all the judges went there for lunch every day. And a friend of mine was sitting in a booth next to the judges and actually heard them talking about this. And one of them said, "We'll show that uppity woman."
Uppity woman. So when then, because now you have 35 publications? Is that where it is? Like some are digital, obviously?
It's in the mid-30s, and it changes annually. I mean, we analyze and make changes. If the community no longer needs or wants it, we end it. And
you end it.
You know, I kind of created the company by looking for community needs, and if there's no need, particularly in publishing nowadays, you're not going to succeed.
Mm-hmm.
You have to really find a need. And so that's how we've found new products over the years.
So in an era where out of, like before we started recording, we were talking about like print, right? Mm-hmm. How many of those are print?
You know, I need to count, but we have copies of almost everything in our reception area. And I'd say there are at least 15.
Amazing. So when did you start DSM Magazine? I think the reason why DSM Magazine, it's a little bit more to me in my heart, I think, and in my brain, is because I was very lucky to be in the cover with that design that I made. But I had been following for years before.
I pulled the cover that you were on. I hope you still have a copy of it.
Oh, yes, I do. I have like 8. And my mom has like 8 too.
Well, that was a beautiful photograph.
Thank you.
And so I started it, I think about 21 years ago. I started Winefest the same year. And I look back and think, what was I doing trying to do both of them the same year?
Okay, they're both very successful.
Yes, indeed. Mm-hmm.
Very successful, very fun, very amazing. Mm-hmm. Again, like events, organizations, everything that they do.
Well, the young woman, Natasha Sales, who is the executive for Winefest,
she's lovely,
just amazing. I mean, you look at her and she's lovely and young and pretty and full of energy and so on. But she's smart. She communicates well. Very creative.
Yes,
just
very
done
creative.
A fabulous job. They've taken it from a 2-night affair to there's something every single month, and many months, 2 or 3 things.
Yeah, there's always fun things.
Mm-hmm.
What the launch parties for DSM Magazine. So part of my research was that you used to be like the lady of the parties. Like you used to throw amazing, like just dinners or events or like parties at your house. Is that how?
No.
That's what you decided, amazing DSM launch parties?
When I think it was like 2 weeks before we were to receive the first issue. And all of a sudden, I thought, I'm always reading about those launch parties in New York. magazines need a launch party. So I decided to have a party. It was just like an hour and a half at a wonderful restaurant called the Art House. And it no longer exists, but it was a restaurant on one side and an art gallery on the other. Perfect place to do it. And I didn't print any invitations, and I just asked people that were friends that I saw, please come to a little lunch party we're having. And I had the photographer there. We served wine and a few hors d'oeuvres. And the photographer, after a very short program, we handed out the first issue. Well, of course, brand new. Everybody was dying to see what in the world might be in there. And the photographer caught all 75 people just with it open. And I looked at that picture, and I thought, we've got to do this for every single issue. And a few days later, I got the bill from Art House.
From like the whole party?
For the food and wine. And I thought, there's no way I can build this into my business plan. And so I came up with the idea that the advertisers would love to have an audience like that in their space. And so I said to my sales staff, we're going to have a launch party every single time. And I want the advertisers to pay for the party. I won't charge them anything else, but they have to advertise in every single issue to qualify for the party. Well, some of those same salespeople are still with me, believe it or not.
That's amazing.
And Yolanda Crystal is one of them, and we laugh about. She said, "I thought you were crazy. How are we going to talk?
How are they going to say yes to that?"
Because with crowds we get now, it's easily $10,000 cost to do that.
Yeah.
And anyway, they went out and discovered how easy it was, that indeed those advertisers did want those people in their business, and the other thing, it increased the frequency of sales, because to qualify, you have to advertise in every issue. And we, for years, have had a waiting list every year. It sells out.
For the parties? For the lounge parties?
We sell out a year in advance, and then we have a waiting list.
That's amazing.
It is.
Because
those parties are fun.
Oh, no, those are phenomenal parties. Those are
we get
parties.
Anywhere from 300, I think the record was 700. And the first time we set that record for 700 was when the Botanical Center reopened, and nobody had been in it. So,
yet.
Yeah, so it was a double draw. But the second one was just recently, and it was a shocker.
Where was it?
Paws and Pints.
Oh my God, yes, that place is so fun.
We had 700 people at that. And I don't know if you saw the issue afterwards, but where we showed the people at the party, we showed the dogs at the party.
Yes, I saw it. We were not in town, but I remember, because I remember my husband was like, we have to be there. And then we ended up having being Austin, but Yes, I've seen the photos. Yeah. DSM Magazine lunch parties are like legendary. They're like very fun. They're very awesome. And then, yes, it's like, it's a networking event, but it never feels like a networking event either. It feels like something cool and exciting that you're doing. You'll run into, amazing people like you, obviously, and Susana, and people from the business, but it never... Because I have as a creative person, I have a really tough time with networking. And DSM Magazine lunch parties never feel like a networking event. It just feels like I'm going to go to a fashion party.
Had one at Stivers in Waukee. And that was such fun because, again, the location gives you some variety. There are people who come to every single one.
Yeah.
And
so Stivers in Waukee?
Mm-hmm. And anyway... it was such a different setting. It was lots of times they're a very sophisticated setting, and this was kind of a working place, but it was huge, and they had fabulous food, so it was lovely.
That's exciting.
And because in this issue we have the write-up and the pictures of the 40 under 4, the Sages over 70.
Sages over 70.
And so many of the sages were there. That was fun.
When is that event?
That's Tuesday night.
That's Tuesday night already? So I've met you when I was at the launch party for my own cover. But you were busy and we were doing the things, and then we were at Sages over 70. A really good friend of ours, Tar Macias and Erika Macias, invited us to the event. And I remember you just walked in and I was already getting a drink, and you just walked with this like amazing coat. And I was like, yes. I was like, that's who I want to be when I grow up. I wish I could have taken a picture of you, but I was like super like, not scared of you, but I was just like, no, I cannot fangirl over such a woman. And I have felt like that about you. And I feel like I know a lot of women in Des Moines feel the same way.
No, you're very kind to me. I think besides my children, helping people and seeing that you've made a difference is probably the most rewarding thing, and one of the reasons I'm still in business, because I can have much more impact on people's lives owning the publications than I could if I retired. And so because I know it's obviously not money, like, why do you keep doing what you're doing? Why do you keep working? There are probably a lot of reasons, and one of them is because I love what I do, and at this point in time, I can choose what I delegate and choose what I do. So I do the things I really enjoy and delegate the things that are not so much fun. And I'm not talented I'm not a writer, and we have some of the most amazing writers, and our editor, Michael Moraine, is just amazing.
Yes.
He's so wonderful. And such a delight to work with, in addition. Awesome. So, first of all, I just enjoy it. Second of all, I've been blessed with great health. I have no health problems whatsoever, except a little bit of hearing loss. But I watch my friends, and about 50% of them retire, and seems like the age overnight. It's just amazing.
Because they retire, because they're not good.
And second of all, the other 50% hate retirement, just hate it. And, I love activity and I love surprises. When I wake up in the morning, I think, what's going to happen today? Who's going to call me out of the blue and ask me to do something? Yesterday, day before, earlier this week, I was asked to do a little video for Community Foundation, and I was co-chair of the ballet's fundraiser to downtown.
Which they are there now.
Oh, it's huge. The fund drive, we raised double what the goal was.
That's amazing.
And, the fun thing is EMC was very supportive and helpful in making that happen. But they put big, big windows right on the street. And people stop and because they can look in and watch the dancers practicing.
Yes, I've only seen it from like their social media from the inside, but people do stop and watch.
Oh, our ballet has gone. Well, we just had 3 professional dancing positions open. They had 600 applications, not just from the United States, all over the world.
Whoa.
Those people do the research and know what's happening in those companies. 600 for 3 positions. Amazing. Isn't that wonderful?
That is amazing. That is beautiful. That's one of the boards that you sit on. How many boards do you sit on?
Well, that's one of the things I did cut back because it's very time consuming. If you're going to sit on a board, you need to go to the meetings and do the work.
Do the work.
And so I've resigned from a lot. I still sit on the Grinnell College board and the International Sculpture Center board.
That's awesome.
Those were both tremendously interesting.
Was art and culture always part of your life?
No, I grew up in a very small town, population 600, graduated with a class of 13, and there were no art classes. I mean, and my family was not, my father was a mechanic, and my mother was a homemaker, as almost every woman was then, if she wasn't a nurse or a school teacher. And so, no, I wasn't exposed until after I went out in the world and went to work and found that I loved it, just like interior design. And Jack Bloodgood, the architect, liked what I did to a house that he built. And so he hired me, and so I got to work with him and learn so much from him.
Oh my God, that's amazing.
You'll have to come down and see my new office.
I will love that. I would be honored to be there. Because it's like you have just such a sense of like how you put yourself together and such a sense of style. And then you just give this feeling that you have always known. Like, how do you do
I was a late learner, actually.
I have to ask like a couple things of like where we are, because as someone who has achieved so much in both of your business and life, like what kind of legacy do you hope to leave behind? And how do you want to be remembered?
Well, first of all, I look back on how I reared my daughters and what I taught verbally and what I taught by example, not realizing I was teaching them. And I have such a wonderful relationship with them. I mean,
you have 3 daughters.
3 daughters. Mm-hmm. And I realized when their father died that he loved beautiful things, and he had a lot of beautiful things. And I was concerned that maybe when it came time to divide them, there might be a little tension, even though they get along incredibly well. And so I asked to sit in while they were doing that. First thing they came across was a big box that had photographs and notes that he had saved over the years. They spent 2 hours on that before they even looked at
the beautiful things.
And I made a vow that I was going to give them a memory every single year that they could not forget. And so I started taking them on trips, and we've had a trip every year since, and they've been memorable and wonderful.
That's amazing. So your legacy are the 3 of them.
That's
one of your legacies, because you have many.
That's the personal legacy. And when Annabelle first served on a board, I read about it. She didn't even mention it to me. And I told her how thrilled I was. She was much younger then. This was a lot of years ago. And she said, well, how could I not, living with you?
Right. I've met your daughter, too. And once I was doing my research, I was like, Annabelle is her daughter? I didn't know that. And I was like, oh, my God, it makes so much sense.
Well, the other legacy, I want the company to continue. And as you can imagine, over the years, I've had many, many offers. In fact, I did sell it at one time. You
did sold it and you bought it back.
Mm-hmm. I sold it because I was doing estate planning, and I was concerned that if I died earlier, unexpectedly, that none of the girls were interested in running the business, and they didn't know the business, and they hadn't bought or sold a business. Mm-hmm. So I thought that would that would be the smartest thing I could do for them. And you obviously know the story. 3 years later, the company had purchased like 12 other papers and overpaid for all except mine. You're supposed to laugh at that.
Yeah, like you're rolling my eyes because of course.
And they went bankrupt. They had over leveraged the banks in, that was, let's see, that 07, I think it was. And then
7.
yeah, and then there was a recession.
2008.
And they had purchased companies that were losing money when they bought them. And so going through 07, and so anyway, we kind of bankrolled them for a couple of years, and then finally they took bankruptcy. So I bought it back, and so grateful because now I've got my estate taken care of, so I don't have to worry about that. But still, the daughters don't want to get involved. And what I want is for the company to go on and to continue helping to solve problems in the community. So I'm looking at how I can do that. I've got a little plan forming.
That's good. We started, talking about where we are in the state of the country, because of after the election. Like, what advice would you give women?
Oh gosh, I talk to young women, and I never say no when someone asks to meet with me. So I meet with a lot of young women and men. And first thing, if I'm giving a speech or if I'm talking to an individual, talk about their integrity and how important it is to build your reputation for honesty and transparency, and it opens doors, and if people trust you, you'll be more successful. So that's the most important thing. And I say the other thing is you sleep well at night. If you're never feeling badly about something you have done that you maybe shouldn't have done. So integrity is the first thing I always talk about. You heard me talk a lot about perseverance. We talked about risk-taking, learn to take risks. The other thing that young women don't seem to do as well as young men is negotiate. And there's a women's leadership school at Morningside that is named after me, so I stay involved with it. And they asked me what I wanted in the curriculum. And I said, well, the only two things that I want to make sure you talk about at some point in the year is taking and negotiation skills. And I said, I don't want people just to get comfortable. I want them to love negotiating. I adore negotiations.
It's tough. Negotiating is hard.
So often people say, young women particularly, will say, oh, it just doesn't feel good. And what I say is that in a good negotiation, both parties get something they wouldn't get otherwise.
Right.
So that's how you have to approach it. I have to give up something, and I will get something. And let's talk about
basically
what it is.
Yeah.
So
negotiation.
It's fun.
We'll add that to the list.
When I started, I was scared to death, and I would practice in front of the mirror.
I was practicing in front of the mirror today before you came in here. You don't seem like the person that's scared of anything.
No.
Have you ever been scared of anything other than the first round?
Well, when we renamed the digital publication Fearless, I used to explain, I don't know if we put that in the bottom anymore, but fearless doesn't mean without fear. It means acting even though you have that fear. We all have fear. And different things. like jumping out of a plane is fearsome to some people.
There, yes.
But, you know, when a fireman goes into a house to rescue someone, we call him fearless, but he's scared to death. He wants to live. And so that's the point I tried to make about it, that you act in spite of the fear.
Fearless is like a digital publication for
women of any age, and we have a lot of male subscribers also, and we have a few males that come to our events. But, you know, as a small girl in a small town, my only role models for the future were my school teachers. I loved some of them, but I knew I didn't want to be a teacher. And nursing was another career, and I didn't want to be a nurse. And the third career choice that you had was secretarial work, which is what I chose. And I thought it'd be more interesting and more diversity in it. So, and that I'd continue to learn. I wanted to be a legal secretary, and I thought that would be exciting. And it was. I loved it. I did it for 20 years.
20 years, right?
Yeah. But I've forgotten what the question.
So it's to inspire more women. Fearless is made to inspire more women, right? To inspire like people that want to be entrepreneurs.
Yeah. So I'm in the small town and no role models of possibilities. Yeah. So early in the publishing career, when it was all print, before digital existed, I kept having this dream of a publication that would tell stories and talk about issues that would be inspiring and show role models for all sorts of different possibilities. And there was just, and I wanted it to be statewide because I thought of all those girls in the small towns that didn't have role models. And there just was no way that you could do a business plan that would make that work statewide. Mm-hmm. So the minute digital came in, I thought, aha, I can do it. I can do it. Uh-huh. Because the costs are much, much less without the printing and the postage. And so I was able to do it. That's one of my dreams. It's certainly not one of our more profitable publications, but it's still one of my favorites.
Isn't that a little heartbreaking how like the ones that usually are your favorite things, or do you think that would be like more and then successful on a way because you have such a deep heart and then they don't do well? But it is incredible. And I'll make sure I link it in my show notes because it is like Susana de Baca sent it to me for, I don't remember who was featured or if she asked me something, and then I subscribed to it, or I don't remember what I did, but then I think it was another email, and then this morning when you and I were emailing again, I was like, yeah, I've been reading about it because I've been literally researching you.
Well, you
like
know,
a lot.
Yeah. When I started it 9 years ago, it got named without my involvement, and it was called Lift Iowa. And it didn't say anything. It didn't. And then life changed in the first 5 years, and so I just kind of repositioned it. And I said, I wanted it to be a little edgier, and I want a new name. And I worked hard on that name. I hired someone to come consult with me to help be creative because I wanted it to be edgy and make people think, what is that? What?
It feels like that. It feels edgy. It feels very cool. And amazing people that
we just had an event, and we invite the women of influence to come and have a little gathering first because they love to be around each other, as do I.
I find that awesome.
And then we go have lunch with women who are fearless readers and the women of influence.
So fun.
Yeah, it mixes the young and the old.
Yeah, I love that.
For the program, the women of influence move around to different tables and answer questions and talk about things.
That's wonderful.
It is. It's great. I love it.
I'll make sure to subscribe again. Okay, before you leave me today, though, I'm going to ask you, I told you at the beginning, 10 fast, rapid questions. Fast, rapid is something. Because they're just fun. And you say you love fun. Okay, favorite book?
Favorite book? Oh, golly. I'll give you one year we were having a very difficult time. This was early on, and I always gave a present to each of the staff members. And that year, normally it was something kind of special that they wouldn't buy for themselves. That year, it was the book The Little Engine That Could,
The Little Engine
that told the story about the difficulty of climbing the hills and so on. And it told the story of that year for us. And so that's my favorite book.
Okay, all right. I'm going to check it out. Favorite magazine? It cannot be one of yours.
None of mine. Okay. I think it's Venture, because it's about travel.
And you travel a lot.
I do.
We need to have just a podcast about all your travels. Favorite fashion designer?
Well, it was for many years a man named Zoran, Zoran, and he designed things in luscious fabrics, just extraordinary, that you couldn't find anyplace else, but terribly simple, almost box-like. And I bought a jacket of his and fell in love with it. And so every year I'd buy one piece of Zoran. I probably have 30 pieces now. But when he went out of business, he was very vain, and he didn't want to sell his business because he didn't want anyone else to
his name.
Be attached to his name. And so I felt comfortable having things copied, and they're so simple. You can't find the fabrics quite as luscious, but anyway, he was my favorite.
The patterns.
But, go online, Google Zoran, because you can buy used pieces now.
Like eBay, and Etsy, like all of those places sell like all of those.
My oldest daughter just bought a piece of his.
I love it. Yes, I'm going to do that. Go to perfume.
Joy.
Sounds like you. What's your signature color?
White.
Yes. Coffee or tea?
Coffee.
Every time. Favorite city to visit? That's a tough one, 'cause I'm a traveler.
London.
London. Okay. If you could have dinner with any historical figure, who would it be?
Gloria Steinem.
That's still possible.
Yeah. Well, I spent a day with her once. She's fabulous. She has the greatest sense of humor, and of course she's brilliant and just fascinating. I'd love to spend time with her again, but when I chaired Planned Parenthood, she came and I got to host her all day. In fact, when I picked her up for dinner, she was staying at Johnny and Kay's motel, which doesn't exist, but it was before we had a nice hotel. It was the best place to stay, and it was on Fleur Drive. And it was literally a motel, so I'm knocking at the door. And she said, "It's open, come in." I go in. She said, "Just sit down, I'll be ready in a minute." And where I was sitting, I could see the bathroom mirror. And she's back combing her hair.
You could just see that.
I can see it now.
Wow. Where do you guys had dinner that time?
It had to be a Planned Parenthood dinner, so it was a group. But
okay.
I was with her. There was a press conference early in the morning. And at that time, all the press people were male. Mm-hmm. And there was a lot of derision toward the women's movement, and they thought, they were going to put her in her place. And so they're asking questions. And again, I wish I had a recording of this, but she just handled it so beautifully with humor and just didn't lower it. And they were impressed.
Yeah, of course she did. That makes so much sense. What's your favorite way to unwind after a busy day?
My favorite wine?
Unwind. How do you unwind after a busy day? Like, how do you relax when you get home?
I have a scotch and soda.
When you get home, you're like this.
And then I have a glass of wine with dinner.
Amazing. I'm like such a beautiful lady. What's one piece of advice you give your younger self?
I did it again this morning in a management meeting. We were talking about how people were dealing with election stress. And I do say this more often now than I used to. Be happy. Find what makes you happy. It's, it's like putting on your little breathing device in the airport before you help someone else. If you're happy, you're much more able to give to others and make others happy. And if you're unhappy, you're very likely to make someone else unhappy.
Oh, I think we'll end it with that. It's beautiful. I'd love to find joy. Thank you so much, Connie, for joining us today. It's not every day that you get to sit down with someone as stylish and iconic as she is. Her wisdom, grace, and authenticity shine through in everything she does. And it's been an absolute privilege to dive into such a rich and meaningful conversation with her. I hope this conversation inspires you to think bigger and live bolder. A big thank you to Infinite Resources for your incredible support. This podcast wouldn't be possible without you. I'm truly grateful for everything you do to make this show happen. You can find Undocumented Momhood at amplifydsm.com, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube. Thanks again for tuning in. Take care y hasta la próxima.